So I would like to welcome everyone to our third virtual Tableau user group, St. Louis Tableau user group meeting. For those who attended back in July, hopefully you enjoyed that one, and I would like to welcome all the new members as well as the people who have attended our previous versions. We have a lot of exciting content today, and I would like to start off, well, by giving you putting some useful information out there. We have, so Tableau is a virtual Tableau user group set up on their website. So please join the Tableau in the virtual events section. Right now, there's a discussion on visual help. Oh, go back. So head on over to that group and join the discussion. Next, St. Louis Tableau user group, we have a LinkedIn group. So please stay connected with all of us. If you haven't joined already, please participate in the LinkedIn group and join and start discussions and just stay connected with everyone. This is normally how we advertise the next meeting, and we keep people updated. And there's a lot of good information out there, and there's a lot of good conversations around Tableau and data in general. We'd like to put out some information on the Tableau conference. If you aren't aware of the Tableau conference, is next month, coming up in a few weeks, and it's free this year. It's 100% free. It's a really good conference. We highly recommend that if you could take some time out your day to at least sign up for it, sit in on some sessions, a lot of great information. And just by sitting in on the sessions, you will have visibility to, all the sessions are recorded, so you'll have visibility to those recordings once they are released. Again, it's October the 6th through the 8th. It's free. If you have the opportunity, right after this meeting, if you haven't signed up already, sign up for it and view the agenda for the conference and pick your different sessions and sit in on the sessions, because it's a great learning opportunity, great value. Another house cleaning item, we always mention if anyone is aware of if you have any job opportunities that you would like to share with the group, again, go out to the LinkedIn site or reach out to any of us as far as the Tableau user group goes, and let's put that information out there. This is I guess this is a trying time right now, and we want to help each other out as much as possible, get those job opportunities out there, and just share the wealth and share the information. And as always, if you have anyone in the audience, if you have something cool that you've done and you would like to share it with the group, please reach out again on the user group site, or reach out to anyone who's involved with the St. Louis Tableau user group, because we would love to see the information. This is a safe space. You feel comfortable sharing that information if you haven't presented before. This would be a great opportunity to present and share that information with others. So again, if you would like to speak, or if you know of anyone who would like to speak, or if you have any topics or ideas that you would like to see mentioned or presented during the user group meeting, please feel free to reach out to any of us. And so, like I think I said before, we have a great session today. We have a few different speakers today, and I want to let everyone know that this session is being recorded. If you have any questions, again, this is offered over Zoom. I'm sure all of us are familiar with Zoom, but you could type questions to the panel in the chat window, and someone will make note of that question, and we'll see if we can get the question answered. This is today's agenda. Coming up, we have David and Elsa. They are going to give a presentation on new and recent features. Then at 2:40, we have a hackathon from RGA St. Louis, RGA St. Louis on the area Foodbank. And then at 3 o'clock, we have a panel discussion on COVID data in St. Louis. So with that being said, I'd like to turn Zoom over to David.
Thanks, Sean. Give me just a minute to get going here. Let's talk about that.
Right.
Anyway, so like I was saying, so we're going to cover Tableau desktop and server new and recent features. So kicking it off with one of the things that was really well received last year at Tableau conference when they announced it was Viz animations. So these were released in Tableau 2020.1. So from that point, they work on Tableau server, Tableau Online and Tableau Public. If you're not familiar with those products, they're kept up to date with the most recent release. So right now, Tableau's most recent release or most recent production release is 2020.3. So both public and online are out there in that version. Otherwise, Tableau server, if you're hosting that on your own, that's going to be, at your organization's leisure as to what version you're on. We'll jump into an example of Tableau animations, our Viz animations, in just a minute while we talk about some other stuff. The next biggest thing that gained folks' attention at Tableau conference last year was when they announced that dynamic parameters were coming. So these were released also in version 2020.1, work on all versions since then. And these are really groundbreaking and kind of game-changing for Tableau. So let's talk about what's required to do some dynamic parameters. So number one, we're talking about parameters. So what dynamic parameters means is that we can dynamically feed in the value of the parameter when the workbook is open, or the available options in a list for a parameter. So the requirements for that would be a target parameter. Obviously, if we're messing with parameters, we have to have one to affect. So all parameter data types can be made to have a dynamic value when the workbook opens. However, since Boolean parameters can only be either true or false, you cannot feed in the list of values. So you'll need either a source to feed in the value when the workbook opens, or a source to add values to the list. So let's actually jump out of this presentation and straight into Tableau, and we'll look at an example of this. So this is just a really quick demo of how this works. So let's look at it on Tableau. So I created this awesome dashboard yesterday, and I have a parameter called now, and I have a calculated field called now. So when I come into this dashboard, I want to see what time it is right this very second. So this is a calculated field, and this is my parameter. So when I refresh this, it should change from 12:46, which is Central Time, to roughly 2:12, 2:13, depending on when I hit refresh. That will also refresh this parameter. So let's see what happens. It's like I'm coming into this, or maybe better would be to come into it for the first time. So I come into this guy, and well, it says 1:34, which seems odd. Of course, it's a live demo, so it's not going to work. But when I refresh it, like I'm opening it for the first time, now it says that it's 2:12 and 54 seconds. So this calculated field is feeding my parameter. So if I jump to a different dashboard, and let's say I come back to this, it does it again. So every time I open this dashboard, this field is going to feed my parameter. So let's look at how we set that up. So this is just a really simple worksheet, right? So the only thing I have here is a text. So just so you know, I'm not doing any crazy magic, I have my field and a header. So let's look at what this field looks like. If I can find it, dynamic parameter source. So I named it something that was, easy to find. I know that I'm using this to feed a dynamic parameter. It's my source. Now is probably not a good practice to have elsewhere in your dashboard. So, label it something that you can find. So just as a reminder, anything that is like now or today is going to return a time or date based on the location of where the Tableau server or Tableau online is located. So if I actually hit Command R and refresh this in here, I'm looking at what the GMT are 5 hours earlier than today, or than right now. So, but when I publish it on Tableau Public, they're sitting in GMT. So we're just going to subtract 5 hours. So that's my source, right? So the thing about this is only one value. I can't get multiple values for what time it is right now. And that's super important as we come down here and we look at this dynamic parameter. So I named my parameter. Let's just create a brand new one. Create parameter. And call this now. And we're going to change our data type to date and time. The current value is right now. But when the value, or when to make it dynamic, we have to tell it what we want it to be when it opens. So if I leave it as current value, next time I open this workbook, or if I publish it to Tableau Public or Server, it's always going to show 9/16 at 2:15:08. So if we come in here and we say, let's change that, we can feed it from either a parameter. So it'll only let you feed it from a parameter that is a similar date time or data type, so date and time, or I can feed it from a calculated field or a field in my data. So worth mentioning though, if we look at the list of options here, I can tell you that I have more than just those 5 different date time fields. So I definitely have future date. I have, order date, ship date, things like that. So why don't I see those? Does anybody know? I don't know if you'll be able to talk to me, but the reason we don't see those is if I look at order date, I'm going to have several available values in there. So Tableau won't know what to feed in for that, what I want now to be. So I mentioned with now, it can only be one time, right? Now is always now. It's never, 2:15 and 3:15 at the same time. If you take time zones out of it, it's always the exact same time. So that's really as simple as it is. So if I refresh this again, refresh the data source, it updated to what time it is right this second. This will change to 2:17 in a second, and we can go back to the sheet. And as we do, it reflects to 9:17. Remember, we're subtracting 5 hours. Let's look at one small other thing. So if we want to create a parameter for a dimension, let's say that we want to make it so that if somebody's name gets added to person, we can do the exact same thing and make sure that this is dynamic. So all you have to do, this will work with anything, like I said, other than true, false, or Booleans. So if we want this to update the values when we come in, we can set it to open to person. So in case somebody else gets added to person, they will then be reflected as an option in this parameter. All right, are there any questions that have come through on Zoom? I can't see it, so Sean or Elsa, if anybody's asked any questions, if you wanna let me know.
I haven't seen a question, but I do have kind of a question of when do you think this would be useful? Like with
good,
books that you have?
Good. Yeah, great question. So I don't know if anybody else has dashboards at work where they're showing monthly data and they've published it and they're using a parameter to either feed into the SQL statement or they're using a parameter to just use as a filter. So the problem pre-2020.1 was that if I create this dashboard in August of 2018 and I publish it and I say that I'm filtered down to August of 2018, when I open that, regardless of what date it is, it could be, August of 2019 or August of 2020. So if somebody comes into that, they're automatically looking at stale data. So if you wanted to create or make it so that when your audience comes into their workbook that they're always looking at the last month's data, that would be super easy to do. So let's create a calculated field. called last month dynamic parameter, and we are going to date add month -1 today, or if it was a better practice, you would be feeding in a sysdate from whatever data source you're using. So this is going to take 1 month off of today. We could even make it easier and date trunk this to the month and then force this into a dynamic parameter. Let's create a parameter, call it date filter. I'm gonna pick last month, and automatically I'm looking at August 1st. So if I set this as my filter, I would only be looking at last month's values, right? So it would take one more calculated field, right, to make it work. But that would be a practical application. Does that answer your question, Elsa?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so another thing that was added is another dashboard object. So it's a download button for your dashboard. So this button can allow the user to download elements of the dashboard as a PDF, PNG data, or a CSV, or PowerPoint. So let's look at that really quick. So I've created a couple demos here that we're going to talk about in a minute. But over here in the objects panel, so these are available objects other than sheets that can be drug onto a dashboard. The new one that was added is download. So I can take this on and we'll put it, make it gigantic. And similar to other buttons that were added to Tableau, I can edit this button. I have to pick what I want it to export to. So do I want a PDF, an image, or crosstab, or even PowerPoint? We'll go with, actually, let's do image. I can pick what my button is. If I want it to be a text button, I just tell it what I want it to say right here. So click here to download your image. Perfect. So let's go ahead. I can change color, make it nice, whatever that teal color is, or this lovely blue. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Apply, there we go. So now, if I click this, it's going to download this as an image. Let me see if I can do this without sharing my entire world. So here we go. So clicking that button downloaded everything to a PNG file for me, right? So we could also do this and say, we want to edit this button, and instead of being text, we want it to be image. We can choose an image. Let's look at the desktop or actually downloads. So I have a PNG image that I created earlier today. Let's go ahead and do that. So now if they click this obnoxiously large button, maybe we make it a little bit less offensive. So now if we click this, it's going to give me the exact same thing. Click save. It's going to replace my existing. And then once I drag it back over, super straightforward. So this takes away some of the, I guess, hassle of scheduling if you want something scheduled and sent to you as PowerPoint, or if you want to be able to let your audience have the capability to make changes to filters or interact with their viz and then download an image to put in a PowerPoint deck, that would be a good use case there. All right, next. Now we're getting to the kind of the interesting things.
Hey, Dave.
So for David.
Yep. Question.
We have a couple questions from the chat window before you move on to the next one. It was around the dates, the previous dates that you have shown. How do you set it up so that it shows all the results, including last 4 months, but not partial days in the current month?
Okay, so let's just do that. So right here, where's my order date? So we definitely have that. So this new new Tableau dashboard, our new Tableau sample superstore database, our data source has all kinds of stuff in it. So let's change this to exact date. Let's make it discrete just so I can see all those dates, and let's sort it the other way. Okay, perfect. So right now I have every date through the end of the year, right? So we already created that date filter. So let's create a calculated field that says, let's just call it old data. Not this month. So we'll say order date. Date. We're going to trunk this to the month because I already did that for the parameter source that I fed in. So without having to go in and touch that, we're going to say that it's less than or equal to our parameter. So we can just grab that. I called it date filter. So grab it and drag it in. It's going to tell me that this is valid. So before we go ahead and use that as a filter, let's bring it on. So we can see that everything in December is coming through as false. If we come down, still in September, we're false, but in August, we're true. So let's change this actually to month. Now that we know it works at the date level. Oh, come on. Keep it discrete. And then when I put this filter on, take it off of my filter or off of the text card and put it on filters, I set it to true. If I sort this again, sort it descending, I can see that the most recent date in my data is August 2020.
Oh, cool. Thanks, David. Right, cool. Thank you. So
Is there another
one
question?
more question?
Yep.
Yes, we have a few more actually. All right, so I can do forecast. How were you able to do the prediction?
We're going to get there, so let's not jump too far ahead. I knew when I went to that to use that for my button that I was going to have questions for it. So.
Okay, David, can you show that formula one more time? The formula that you used for that calculated field.
For this one?
Yes.
I've done a few calculated fields, so I'm not sure.
Oh, okay, I got you. Okay.
And
yep.
As always, I'm always available after this. So if somebody wants to walk through the examples, you know, it's just a quick ping. Ryan gave me some trouble earlier for saying I was going to send people to my LinkedIn, but feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn.
I knew it.
Okay. All right. Got it, David. Thank you very much for that one there. I have one more question. Sorry.
Yeah.
How would the download options look if published on server?
Well, we're going to publish this to Tableau Public in a minute. So
okay.
let's wait just a second and we'll see what it looks like.
Okay. All right. And then once you publish the server, we have a question about security on how do you control the download the data and all that stuff. So, okay. Thanks, David. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert on that one and tell you that I probably am not going to know the answer to that. So that's probably a Tableau question that we'll need to ask.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk about some changes that Tableau has made to the interface. So number one that we haven't seen yet is that joins are out. So if you were at Tableau conference last year, they talked a lot about noodles in one of the breakout sessions or one of the keynote sessions actually. So noodles are in and joins are out. So I'll tell you what that means in a minute. The data pane on the left-hand side of Tableau has been totally reorganized. So I'll tell you what this means by looking at it. And then some of the generated fields, which I'm kind of sad about, is number of records is no longer there. And they had to do that because number of records no longer works. If you ever looked at what really made up that field in Tableau, it was just a calculated field and it was set to 1. And I've actually done that here. And if I had brought number of records on earlier, that 1 would have summed and told me how many records I had for August 2020. It no longer does that. So, and that's all because of the changes they made here. So let's look at our data source. So like I mentioned, I'm using the Tableau sample data source Superstore. And You'll notice here, the first thing that's changed is I no longer have, I can't click here and say, hey, I want my join to be an inner join or a left join. What I can do is click that and define what my relationship looks like, right? So orders is my main table over here on the left and people is on the right. So, you know, maybe I know that for every order, I don't have a person assigned. So I would want to make it a left outer join so that orders was bringing all the data and only, you know, wasn't being restricted by orders where there was no people assigned. I can't do that anymore, but what I can tell it is that this people table, if I click on it here, I can see that people is assigned by the region. So that's great. And I know that I have region in people, and I know that I have region somewhere in here. I just saw it, region in here on orders. So click this, I can define what the relationship is. So region equals region, and then I can make a few small changes. So the cardinality says, do I only have one row, one unique row, or is there maybe duplicate data? So if you have no clue, it's best just to leave this as the default options come in and Tableau will handle it. If you know exactly how your data works, they have this great learn more button, and you can click that and see how you can make some small changes here to optimize how Tableau runs the query. We're not going to touch those, but so there's our noodles. See that lovely orange noodle? If I drag this, I can change where the relationship exists, but those are the noodles. So let's look at, I mentioned that it caused some changes over here to our data pane. So if you look at this automatically, you should probably notice that there's no longer two separate windows for dimensions up top and measures below. They're actually commingled here. There's a little line that breaks them, and as with most measures, they're primarily continuous, so they're green, and the majority of them are number values or number data types. So this is the default view if I group by folder, and there are no folders. But if I change this and group this by data source, or rather by table, I think, data source table, I can see that up here in my orders table, I have dimensions for sure. But then as I come down, I have discount profit, future profit, quantity sales, and future sales that are all measures. So there's no big break anymore that separates dimensions from measures. So just something to keep in mind. Sets are also now commingled up here. If I can find one right here, this is a set. So there's no separate area down here for set. The only thing that's segregated anymore is parameters, and that's because there wouldn't be a great way to know that date filter is a parameter and not a field. All right, so let's pop back here.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Dave. What do you do with your workbooks that use number of records from older versions when you have to kind of convert up to this new way?
So I think what you'll have to do, instead of just using the default number of records calculation, you will have to come up with a calculated field and do like a count distinct or a level of detail calculation to you know, pull the right value. I'll tell you that it's kind of a bittersweet thing that it's disappeared, because number of records is useful, especially when you're doing like some quick and dirty check of your data. However, if you use relationships, you know, by defining a relationship between blended data sources, you probably have had an instance where the number was incorrect because of that relationship. So, you know, I understand where they're gone, but to get that same functionality, you'll have to do something slightly different. But that does bring up a good point. Some things have automatically been created as automatically calculated fields. So instead of having a number of records, I now have orders. So it's telling me that this is a count of orders. This is a generated field by Tableau. I also have people, a number of people, and a count of returns. So some of that's done for us. So just for what it's worth. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right, perfect. Then let's keep moving on because I'm stepping on Elsa's time. Okay, so somebody asked about the predictive function. So let's talk about these really quick. So in 2020.3, 3 new functions were added, and it's the first new functions in quite a while, I think actually since they released level of detail calculations. So the first one I'm really excited about is in. So this is just a logical operator. If you've used SQL before, you probably know or are familiar with the in statement. It's really useful in a where clause. But it evaluates as a Boolean. So it evaluates a true false, and it's just checking if anything in expression 1 is in expression 2. If it is, then it returns true. If not, then it returns false. So my example here is my calculated field state, or just column named state, and it's checking if Missouri, Illinois, or Iowa are in that. So you can combine that with some other logic to get some practical uses. So you can create a filter. For instance, if I only wanted to see Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa, I could take this calculated field, put it on filters, and set it to true. The only data that would return would be Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa. Or we can use it as a replacement for case statements or if/or statements. So we'll see that in just a second. And then there's 2 new predictive functions. Both of them are actually table calculations. The one that we're going to go over in detail and hopefully not get a lot of questions about is the model quantile. So this is super useful for forecasting, but the syntax for this is the function model quantile, the quantile that we're going for. So we're going to look at profit in this example. We're looking at profit, and we want to predict based on the future, or sorry, based on the median profit. So our target expression is the sum of profit. So there's already something being done here to call it profit future. And our predictor expression is we want to predict it across future months. So we'll look at that in a minute. And then percentile. So this is a probability that the expected value is going to be less or equal to the observed mark. So I'm not going to go in this one because I didn't have time to come up with an example. So if you're interested in that, there's actually some good examples on the web to dive into. So let's look at profit forecasting. So if you've been in Tableau for some time, you're probably familiar with this view. So we can put profit on here, and then we can come to the analytics pane and we can say, hey, let's look at what the forecast looks like. So when I do that, let's pretend that I didn't just do what I did. When I do that, it's creating this forecast. So this is kind of messy, right? There's no real rhyme or reason. There's no seasonality to this. So all Tableau can really do here is plot this as a linear forecast. So even if I come in here and I want to look at my forecast, it's not really playing ball, but all I can do on that forecast is tell it I want it to guess what the seasonality is, or just let Tableau do it automatically. And if we look at sales, sales is a little bit cleaner. If we look at the data, we can see that the beginning of the year is a little lower, and then by the end of the year we kind of spike. So we do see some seasonality here. So when Tableau does its forecast, it knows that we kind of have this W shape, and that's what it forecasts. So when we look at profit, because we don't have that seasonality, we just get this linear chart, right? Our linear trend. But if we look at this new method using that quantile, we can see that it's using the median for the data, for the profit, and then it's predicting it out. So let's look at exactly what we did there. So the first thing we need to do is create something called future order year. And I've changed how this looks, so let me group it back the way it was. Future date. So if I don't use this future date, if I don't create a future date, my data source only has data in it up until the end of December. We already saw that. So I only have data up until the end of end of 2020. So I need to force this data out a little bit. So I created a pretty quick calculated field that looks at the order date and says that if the order date is the last order date in my data set, then add 12 months. And actually, I'm using a parameter here to make this so it's dynamic. So add the value of my parameter to that order date. Otherwise, just return the order date. So what this does is it gives me this, I'm using it here on the columns. So my axis runs from the beginning of time in this data set, which is October 16th, now through the end of 2021, and a little bit of noise on the end. And really this starts on January of 2017. Okay, so first part's done. The next part is to find where my profit calculation is. Let's use that. If I spell profit right. So I'm looking at future profit. So let's edit that. And all I'm really doing is saying that for December, that last date, I don't want to include that. So, and the only reason we don't want to include that is because it will break what happens here. So for the most part, I want to bring back profit. But since I've already excluded in my future date calculation that last month and forced it out to be December of 2021, let's exclude it. It'll make the forecast a lot easier. And then I have my quantile model, right? So I already told you that I want to use the median profit. So we can see that it's roughly the median profit. So that's my factor, right? Or my quantile. My expression that I want to target and predict is the sum of the future profit. And then what I want to predict that across is time. So I want to predict that across the months of the future date. So when I drag that all on here, I have that profit forecast, which is the gray line. You know, it's this nice kind of sweeping curve. And then I have my just my profit to date, so I can see what that looks like. So just knowing that there is no seasonality to this, and looking at these values, sure, it's only $3,000 roughly difference, but I think that personally, just looking at this, I feel that this is probably a slightly better model than you know, this linear. You know, it's definitely not as good as you know, a full AI solution, but you know, definitely pretty powerful. Are there any questions on the predictions or predictive modeling?
No.
Good. Let's keep it that way. So last thing I want to talk about is this new in function. So let's just say for some reason I don't like the regions that are in my data source, and I want to assign each state a new region. So there's really three ways I could do that. I could write a gigantic case statement that says case state, and then when each state, then what region it should be in, right? So for this, I end up with 51 rows. I can do something very similar and do an if or, and I say if the state equals Illinois, or the state equals Indiana, or the state equals Iowa, and so on, then central. Or I can use the in function, and I can say if the state is in, and then list out my states, then it's this region. So out of the three of these, this is actually the most concise. And it really kind of depends on preference. But this, to me, is a lot more streamlined than writing a gigantic case statement, especially if you're not going to have to modify it. You know, if I need to move Texas from the region of Texas exclamation point, it's probably a little bit easier to do in here because I only have to modify one line of my case statement versus my in statement. I have to delete it from its own line and throw it in. I mean, I guess the effort's probably roughly the same, but it's going to come down to personal preference. I'm excited about it because of the use of filters, and I think this is a lot more streamlined than things like case or the really kind of clunky if or. Okay, so I told you guys I was going to publish this. Let me show you one last thing on the animations. So a quick animation demo. So the one watch out here is that animations are cool, but you have to make sure that how you're using them is really legit for what you're trying to do in business, right? So don't use them just because they're neat, right? So what's happening here is if I click on anything in the 2018 bands, it will animate and change the data down here to 2018, right? So I can do the same thing and go to 2019 and similarly go to 2020. So it's nice, your data moves, but you know, I guess the one good thing is if I want to see year over year what November looked like, I can keep an eye on November and click 2019 and see, wow, 2020 was significantly better than November of 2020. Or the other way around, 2020 November was much better than 19. All right, so really quick, let's go ahead and publish this. So server, publish the workbook. Yeah, we want to overwrite it. So somebody wanted to see what downloading looked like on server. So let's look at that. I did it on profit forecasting, I think. It's a really big, meaty dashboard. It doesn't want to load. So click this. It should pop up down here. And it opens, of course, on my other screen. So drag that over. It looks exactly like it did downloading from desktop. So Elsa, I'm sorry, I went over. If there's any questions, I can answer them after the session, but I want to turn it over to you, Elsa, so that you can present on metrics.
Sure, yeah. Let me do that here.
Thanks, guys. Sorry that I rushed there. I'll try to answer questions in the chat as well.
Yeah, so what I wanted to talk to you guys about was a new feature called metrics. So this is like a Tableau server, Tableau online feature. And so really what it is that there's a new capability where you can actually, just like if you've had data alerts, if you're familiar with those on server, basically you can pick a mark on a dashboard and say that you want to make it into a metric. And why that's useful is I've already created a couple metrics here. And these metrics are basically someone can kind of make their own KPI dashboard. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And really the powerful part of this is someone can use multiple dashboards with multiple data sources. And let's say I'm a leader that needs to look at this dashboard and this one, but all I really care about is 1 or 2 points on there and looking at how is my profit doing? How is our time trend analysis going the way I expect it? They can basically make their own KPI dashboard without having to understand Tableau, how to make their own dashboard. They don't have to try to combine data sources to get that executive level overview. It can be a really nice and easy way to do that. And a lot of the examples when I was looking online, a lot of them are also just showing the powerfulness of this, especially with like Tableau Mobile. My company personally doesn't use Tableau Mobile, but I do know a lot of companies do. And this can be really powerful for someone that is a leader going between meetings when COVID's over and people are back in the office, that they can really quickly check this as just their daily, how's everything doing without having to go into each dashboard. So I'm just going to show you kind of a quick example of how to do it and also how someone could then go and customize it to make their own dashboard the way they would like to see it. So one thing I didn't mention is this is a new feature in 2020.3. So it's definitely brand new. And so we luckily have it on our dev server, but everything I'm going to be demoing is a feature of 2020.3 or higher once that comes out. So I'm going to go to my Explore tab here. I'm going to go into my sandbox that I have set up here. And I can see if you're not used to this UX yet, basically I can filter down to, let's say, my workbooks. Let's say I'm a leader and I want to make a metric for myself. So I'm going to go to this dashboard that I have here, click on it just like I would normally and kind of interact with it. And maybe, I am someone that is just a central region manager. So I would click over here, say I'm just the central. Maybe I only care about technology. And now I kind of have everything I need. I can see that my dashboard here is filtered to what I want. And maybe I'm really interested in how we are doing with, let's say, I don't know, second class shipping and how that's going. I want to make sure that we actually are kind of bringing in more orders with that. And maybe that's something I'm trying to push on my clients versus first class to save money, let's say. So I can actually click on this, and maybe I want to click on this line here. So I have this line. This is what I want to make a metric about. I want to be able to see that trend really quickly. And if you see up here, I have this new little metrics thing here. So if I click on this, I can already see kind of a preview. So it's telling me that, it just refreshed, and it's telling me that I had 2 unique orders. And that's what like my latest one is. I can rename this. So maybe I would call this second class shipping. And I would basically, I could say it was central and tech. If I care about that, I can maybe add a description because maybe I'm going to share this to other people and I want them to know what I'm looking at. And then what's really cool here is I can see the measure that it's doing and also the date dimension. And so for this one, it's grayed out because that's really my only option, but I'll show you there are times where you can change that. And I can also actually pick if I want this to be in a different project. So maybe I'm looking at, I'm in Elsa sandbox, but maybe I want this to be somewhere where the rest of my team can see it. We can kind of talk through that and you can actually change that location. And so I'm just going to click create here. And so it's going to create that metric for me. I can go to that metric, which is nice. So I can go see it. And then something that's really powerful about this too is when I go to this metric, I can kind of dig into it. I can kind of start to look. As you can see, I can kind of just get those key interests of, oh, we had a spike in July of 2017. I can see that connected view. So if I'm ever forget where I got this number from and why I got this number, I can go quickly to that view and see that. And I can see what I'm actually doing it from. So I can see it's account distinct order ID and my month of ship date. And then maybe I want to favorite it. If I know that's something I want to use, I can also share this, edit the description, change owners, things like that. But then let's say I go back to this and maybe I don't have one that is necessarily a trend line. Maybe I'm someone that only cares about Minnesota and I want to see, hopefully our standard class, let's say, goes down. So I can actually click on this. And again, I can click this metric here. And as you can see, it's just the same number as when I hovered over, but maybe I just really want to have this number just pop out to me because that's what I'm actually going to track. I can say, let's say this is Minnesota standard shipping. And again, I can make a description. And then I can see, a little bit about the sum of number of records. I can see that there aren't any date dimensions. But something that I haven't mentioned that's really cool is I can actually kind of go and click and kind of see these previews before I even actually create it. So another way to do this is you just click on metrics before you click on anything and kind of look at what do I want to actually look at here, which is really nice to have as well. So this is kind of a great way that you can kind of get to there. And something I didn't mention is, as you can see, when I actually flip to a different region, to a different filter, Tableau is smart enough to realize, let's use all the filters you've selected and let's use that metric. So this can be really nice when you have people that need to break it down by certain ways. They don't want to go into your dashboard every time and click through it. They just care about 1 or 2 numbers. So that's how you build a metric. And before I wrap up and ask a couple questions, I do want to show you how someone, after they have multiple metrics, can kind of build their own dashboard. So if I'm going to go back to my sandbox here, and I'm going to just filter to my metrics. So I currently just have 4 of them. So what's really nice is Tableau came out with a feature where you can reorder your favorites. So right now I can't reorder anything, but let's say I favorite all of these because I obviously want to look at these a lot more than I do of the dashboards. And I go to my favorites tab here. You can see that it says drag and drop items in grid view to reorder your favorites. And so what's really nice is I can actually, as you can see here, I can start to drag them to where I want them to be. So why this can become in handy is maybe there's certain things that are really, you have an executive that wants to see these 3 numbers, but they also have some more detailed numbers they want to see below. They can basically make their own dashboard here of seeing these different numbers where they can come in, click on their favorites, and they have those key metrics right away without, again, you having to make a custom dashboard, without them having to go between multiple ones and multiple data sources. This can be a really quick and easy way to get those KPIs that they might have. So I know that was a little quick, but does anyone have any questions about that?
Oh, they're only in the chat one day also.
Cool.
No questions right now.
Okay, great. So obviously you can definitely ask questions in the chat as well. And we're about to segue into the next talk, which is actually me again. So you'll keep hearing me talk. But we did want to kind of see what ones that you guys were more interested in. So if people could kind of post in the chat of the things that, maybe Dave, if you could provide a list of them in the chat, but maybe have everyone kind of comment which one sounded really interesting, because we do want to do, you know, future deep dives into some of these features that Dave went over, especially. So
I gotcha. Thanks. Sorry it
Yeah.
took your time.
oh, I don't mind. So the next thing we're going to segue into is I'm going to be joined by Nicole from the Foodbank and also Nick, who works at RGA with me. And we're going to be talking about planning a virtual hackathon. So let me pull up my screen here. Transition. So this was an event that we put on, oh wow, now it's probably been like 2 or 3 months now. Seems like it just happened. But we put on a virtual hackathon at RGA, which is where I work. And we actually partnered with the St. Louis area food bank to do this. This has been an event that was, I would say, almost 9 months in the making. Nicole and I connected actually at a Tableau user group back in, I believe it was like October of last year. And this was kind of an idea that we came up with. And obviously once COVID hit, it was quite a transition to think of, could we still do this event virtually? Because our plan was definitely to do it in person, definitely to do it kind of with each other. And we had to kind of shift that and kind of see if it was possible. And it did go over pretty successfully. And so we wanted to kind of take this little time to talk about what the event was, why it was successful, what we both found value out of this, how it could work for other companies. But this is meant to be a little bit more open and kind of a discussion between obviously Nicole and I. But if you have questions in the chat, please post those in there, because normally we'd probably be more in a kind of panel discussion with you guys. And I know probably you'll have more specific questions on how we actually organize this, but I did want to kind of give you just an overview of the event. So the first thing is just describing what a hackathon is. So RJ partnered with the food bank to put on this Tableau hackathon. And so it was an all-day event where we had 42 participants, and they were split off into teams. They worked in groups, and they're tasked with using the food bank's data to create Tableau dashboards. Was really what we meant by a hackathon. So really they had about 6 hours to complete it. And at the end, they would present it to some judges, and they would actually kind of get feedback from there. And then we actually had a winner for that as well. And so how this idea even came about is we actually had different problems that we had. So I am in a new grad program at my company, and we had this 2-year project where we basically had to find a shelf project in our department that we wanted to work on. And I work on our Tableau Center of Excellence, and we're always trying to find ways to get people more passionate about data visualization, to really work on those skills. Because we have a lot of analysts at RGA, but we do see a lot of tables. We're always trying to kind of push people from tables to graphs. And I was trying to find a way that I could get people to take time out of their very busy days to sit and think about, visual analytics and why that's important. So I was trying to come up with an event for that. And that's when I kind of originally sat on, I think it would be a really good thing to do a hackathon where we get them all in a room. They work on creating a dashboard with some data. And it was originally going to be just a business problem. So we were going to just find, one of the people that uses Tableau that hasn't really updated their dashboards in a while. And we were going to just kind of help them as a group. But when I started thinking about that, I felt a little nervous of, will people actually attend? Could I convince people to take a whole day out of their time to solve someone else's problem? And I did kind of worry about that. And so it was a great opportunity when I actually went to an engagement survey that we had at our company, and we found out that a lot of people at RGA were trying to find more unique ways to give back. within the company. They realized that they wanted to have more community service. They didn't want to just have ways that you donate, with your money and monetarily. They wanted to have more volunteer programs at RGA and wanted to give back through their work and feel that empowered by that. So that's when it kind of sparked my head that it would be really cool to try to use nonprofit data for this. Instead of trying to solve a business problem, maybe work with a nonprofit. And so I would say maybe 2 weeks after that was our user group. And Nicole, if you want to kind of talk a little bit of when you kind of came to the user group and kind of asked for help.
Sure. So we were lucky enough to be introduced to Dave by a board member, and he suggested that we might attend this group. And we are a member of Feeding America, and we were given some Tableau licenses, but we had these licenses and we didn't know what to do with them. And we didn't know, we were trying to figure out how to take some training and didn't really know how to figure it out. So we just kind of came to the group and learned a little bit with a colleague, Maya, of mine. And at the end, we just kind of stood up and said, if anybody wants to help us get off the ground and get started, we would love to do that. And then Elsa called. And there were a couple others who said, hey, maybe if there's something you can think of. But Elsa had this great concrete idea of how we could do something together. And although I will be honest that I was like, I don't really totally understand all of this, but she really kind of shepherded us through the process and has been really helpful, helping us figure out what data would be good to look at, why it would be good to look at, how we could look at it differently than what we're doing now. And it's really opened our eyes to some of the things that we can do possibly within the organization. And then Dave was also in the interim really kind and came and did a training for some of us in person pre-COVID. This was early in the year to help us learn a little bit more as well. And it was just really impactful and helpful for us to see what Tableau can really do and why we should be leaning into it more.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Nicole. Yeah, so really with that, we kind of had these 3 different problems that we had. And when we kind of came up with this hackathon, it actually kind of solved a lot of these problems. So like Nicole mentioned, the food bank was really trying to find a way to kind of jumpstart that analytics. They had the licenses, they were learning them, but didn't really necessarily know how they were going to apply them in the best way. And then RGA had our entire, full-fledged Tableau Center of Excellence. And we have, I don't even know how many, I think like 900 people on server at least, where we have a lot of Tableau expertise. And so we kind of saw how this could bridge the gap. And from my standpoint, from the Center of Excellence, this was a great way for us to get people a little bit more inspired to use Tableau, because I do think sometimes people get so wrapped up into their data that they don't step out and look at Tableau Public. They don't kind of try to use those new cool features. And we wanted to have some kind of event where it's really about how to make the best visuals, how to really use Tableau for that purpose of telling a story with data. And so this was a great event for us to kind of do as well. And then we actually had our participants, which I have Nick on the phone who was a participant, but they're actually able to kind of develop these skills and actually kind of use those to kind of give back to the community. So Nick, I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot, but could you kind of talk about what it was like as a participant to kind of, learn these Tableau skills and use them to give back?
Yeah, sure. So it was kind of a unique event, and all the interns participated in it, and we were already kind of in a unique position doing a virtual internship. And I don't think a lot of us really knew what to expect of it, and a lot of us kind of thought it would probably crash and burn. But Elsa did a really great job with giving us kind of the basic Tableau tools to start out with, and then the whole Tableau COE was kind of there to help us throughout the day. So we didn't really have to know everything about Tableau going into it. But it was really cool to, do something that was for a nonprofit. And then in the end, the winning group got to donate to another nonprofit in the area. And my group ended up winning, and we got to donate to another nonprofit that I volunteered at. So it was a really fulfilling event, and it was a lot of fun. And I've been using Tableau a lot since, and it kind of helped me get a head start in terms of getting used to some of the features and learning it.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so as Nick mentioned, I'll kind of go a little bit more into like the nitty gritty details of how we put on this event. But originally, again, it was supposed to be in person in a big conference room. Everyone split off into teams working at different tables. And we had to kind of shift that because it's virtual. So when we shifted it to virtual, I was a little nervous on how I was going to get people to sign up for a full day. And luckily I was on the internship committee at RGA, and I was given the opportunity where I could basically kind of carve out some time of the summer interns to do this. So they were definitely our guinea pigs. And it was actually a unique challenge because a lot of them had never used Tableau before. And so we actually kind of met and we did a 2-hour training that was specifically for how do you approach data that you're not used to, and how do you kind of form questions out of that data, which the Foodbank provided questions, sample questions that they would ask the data, and how do you take those questions and make them into a dashboard. And so we took about 2 hours kind of working through that, and kind of getting the interns at least up to speed on how to use Tableau. Another really handy thing of using interns was that they get free licenses because they are students. So that was a lot more simple for us to kind of use them as well. But we did have 42 interns. So we split them up into, I believe it was 7 teams of 6 people. And we actually did that based off of a survey that we did of them. And really the biggest thing is we kind of just talked a little bit about the food bank data, but really talking about how can you use visual analytics. And like Nick said, it's kind of helping them also apply that back to their work. How can you kind of approach something almost from a tool agnostic way of how can I make this tell a story? How do I do that? And then we would help you with how do you do that in Tableau. And then they had 6 hours to do it. So they went from, I believe it was like 8 to 2, 8 to 3, working on this on their team. And then they presented to some judges. So Nicole was one of the judges. And then there was a mix of people from RGA. So we had the opportunity to have a lot of leaders at RGA, which was a great opportunity. So the interns got a lot of senior exposure because they're able to kind of show these to them, and the judges were really impressed. And then they were judged on 3 different categories: design, data storytelling, and analytics. So before I get into the details of the scoring rubric, Nicole, do you want to kind of comment on how the judging and how that went kind of virtually?
Yeah, Elsa did a great job with the scoring rubric, which was really helpful. We had a handful of judges from all different walks of life, it seemed, in different experience levels. And my perspective, I have to say, was, you know, some of them were data-oriented people, and I'm the nonprofit person who's just like, is this going to work or be helpful or not? And it was really great to see the students participate and present these presentations that were usually 5 minutes or so, maybe a little longer, but it went through and described their thought process on what they thought the food bank might need, and how the few questions we gave them, how they elaborated and expanded on that. It was really wonderful to see the different ideas and things that made us really excited to get our hands on the data and come back and be like, wow, that is exactly what we're looking for. This is where a food desert is, and this is where we need to be targeting some areas to get more food in and what we could be doing. One group looked at from a school perspective where schools might be. Everyone did a really good job of thinking about it differently and out of the box, which I think is really helpful, because in the nonprofit world, we sometimes get so focused on just getting it all done that we don't have the time to stop, and we're all short-staffed to kind of stop and take a step back and think about it from other perspectives. And this was really a great opportunity to see it from other viewpoints.
Yeah, I agree, Nicole. Yeah, so I think really this is the last slide here, but it's just about a little bit more of the logistics in case anyone's kind of curious of, oh, this sounds like a great idea. How would I even possibly approach this virtually? So again, I mentioned we did a 2-hour training session with them. We recorded it, so they have that afterwards, and we gave them some tips and tricks and like articles they could go look at. We even posted examples of, I kind of went and scoured Tableau Public to find examples of what I would do if I was using this data, so that they kind of had a little bit of a head start if they wanted to use it. And then they were split up with a Microsoft Form survey. We just sent that out, and we asked them things like, do you like design? Do you think of yourself as a designer? Are you a really good presenter? Are you really good at Excel? Are you really good at calculations? What's your major? And kind of looking at these different things and trying to split them up as evenly as possible, so that at least each team had someone that's been exposed to Tableau, so we didn't have just a group of, you know, Tableau gurus on one side. And then they collaborated using Microsoft Teams. So we basically made a whole team for the event. The general channel was where I would post things of here's, you know, what to look for. I would put guides of here's how I would, as a person, kind of split my agenda of first 10, 20 minutes is kind of brainstorming, all those kinds of things. And then they each had a private channel. So then a lot of them actually met on their private channel, some went out to Zoom and things like that, but they all had their own private channel where they could collaborate, share files, and kind of do that throughout the day. And then the presentations were done using a Zoom webinar, and I was amazed. We sent out the Zoom webinar, I think on Tuesday, and the thing was Friday, to like our whole Tableau users distribution list, which is about 700 people, and we had 150 people join, which again was very shocking. That's usually not the numbers I get for any kind of Tableau event, let alone 3 days before sending out an invite. But I just found that there's a lot of traction from people that wanted to give back and wanted to see others giving back and were really interested in this. And we even had managers reach out and thank us for teaching their interns Tableau skills, because they were able to use those throughout the summer and even after that. But it was kind of a great way that, again, they got skills and also kind of gave back to the community and kind of jump-started a little bit more of that volunteerism at RGA. So with that, does anyone have any questions for all three of us, any of us?
Did you have any examples that you are willing to share?
Sure, I can actually pull up one here. Let's see. I do have, we actually have an appendix of all of them, so I can actually, and I'm going to put Nick on the spot for a second, but I might have him talk about what they did for theirs. So
I've got
since
mine
they were
pulled up if you want me to
beautiful.
share.
Yeah. You want to share your screen?
Yep. Yeah, so this was the winning dashboard that my team came up with. So we really attempted to answer 3 basic questions about where the food was going, who should be getting the food, and where are the gaps, the food deserts, like Nicole talked about. And then each of these buttons navigates to different dashboards. A lot of them are maps. These are all broken out by zip code. So we were given Foodbank data, and then we were also just kind of given general like county and zip code data in the St. Louis and Illinois region that had to do a lot with like population, poverty rates, stuff like that. And then we've got just a couple more. So we tried to make ours as dynamic as possible so that you could filter on different things so that the food bank didn't necessarily have to come in and change too many things or know too much about Tableau. They could just use the different filters and go from there.
Yeah, and I can share also. I'll steal it from you, Nick. So we also had, another group that Nicole actually mentioned. They did school data. So I didn't really mention this in total detail, but the food bank's data was they had their distribution data of basically kind of a high level, where was it donated from, like a retail store, individual donation, and then where did it go, and kind of was it a, you know, event or anything like that. And so we actually had one group that was really cool. One of them was a teacher during the normal school year, and he was just doing an internship for the summer. And he wanted to talk about school lunches because he was especially felt that there'd be an impact with COVID, and thought that the food bank should kind of shift where they're actually looking, because there might be students that aren't getting those free lunches from schools, and wanted to make sure that we brought in that school data to see where are the big pockets of where free school lunches are, and are the food bank actually giving as much food there as well, and should we be kind of looking into those areas, especially during COVID. So this is that group that was kind of looking at that, of looking at percent of students on free lunches by zip code, and then looking at where they're actually coming from the food bank. Other ones kind of were looking more at like what is coming in, is it dairy, meat, non-food? Because the food bank did mention they're trying to get more non-food donations. This would kind of help them track down which non-food donations are coming in, where are they going to, all those kinds of questions too. So every group had a little bit of a different approach, but those are just a couple examples for you guys. Great. So I guess with that, I do want Nicole to kind of do a little wrap up of kind of, you know, like next steps for you and everything, and kind of how this is helping you. Because obviously we had a great time doing it at RGA, but you're really the one that gets to continue this with the dashboard. So
Yeah, so we're really excited. We actually just got a Data Vista member who is going to take on Tableau for us. So we're very excited about that. And Elsa and Dave are coming out in October, well, I guess virtually, to do some more training on these actual dashboards for our team, to demo them, and then to also help us learn how that we can run them internally and modify them as we might need to. The great thing about this is the interns use 3 years of data. So it really gives us a great holistic perspective of how things have changed, especially with COVID being part of that data. Our business model is changing rapidly right now, and the need is rapidly advancing, and so we have to keep up with that very quickly, and these dashboards will really help us be able to do that. So we're really excited about that. I sent the invite out earlier this week and had a ton of people already say yes, they were coming. I only had one person who wasn't going to make it, so the team internally is really excited about this. And even from the leadership and board perspective, just the idea of having visualizations around what our work, instead of just talking about numbers, and just being able to see it a little bit more, will be really impactful. And to be able to see it on a map, I mean, when you see a map like that and you realize that we cover 26 counties, we think about it a lot just as the St. Louis Metro, and it helps to see, you know, some of those outlying areas too that we're seeing a growing need in, more so even than our urban areas sometimes. So we're really excited. So
yeah, and
we're grateful.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, just to kind of sum it up, this was really successful for us. Our leadership loved it, kind of loved the response of this, because they're always kind of finding ways of how we can kind of give back, especially since we are kind of more of an analytics company. How can we use those skills? And it's really exciting. They're even kind of looking at how can we use this with other kinds of tools, you know, looking at things like Alteryx, which probably a lot of you are familiar with, kind of how can we use a very similar format to kind of work with nonprofits in the area. So if you have any questions about it, like Dave said, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can definitely message us in the Tableau user group if you have questions about it. But yeah, I think I'm passing over the mic to Ryan, I believe. So
Yeah, thanks, Elsa. Just really get the wheels turning, thinking about what you've done there and what's possible with how we can give back to our community. Using the skills and tools we have in Tableau. So that was a really great presentation. Thanks for sharing. Loved it. So we get to transition away from some things that people have done in Tableau and seeing kind of the visuals into something that I'm very excited about, and that is today we have a panel that we get to have a conversation with 4 different leaders who are working with data in COVID. And what does that mean? Not necessarily COVID data, but now that we're in this environment where things are kind of dynamically changing and we have to make decisions on the fly, people are being forced to interact with their data in different ways. So today I'm really excited to visit with, we've got Scott, Seth, Salman, and Ryan. And I was going to make a joke, but nobody, I can't ever hear anybody laughing. So my joke was your name either had to begin with an S or you had to be named Ryan to be part of this dialogue today. So congratulations on being part of that elite group. So as I laugh at my own joke, you guys can kind of get yourselves the video turned on and get yourselves off of mute if you are. The first thing I'd like to do is just go around the panel here and kind of have everybody introduce themselves. Tell us a little bit about, you know, what your position is, what company you work for, and and maybe some of the unique problems you've been looking at. So we'll go ahead and start with Scott, since I see you on the screen first.
Sure. Hi, my name's Scott Rushing. I work at RGA. My job is an actuary. I've been an actuary there for over 20 years, and my current title and position is head of global research. So researching all kinds of things for a global reinsurance company. But this year it's been all about COVID. So we've had to shift our focus and cancel all of our 2020 goals and focus on COVID. So, reinsurance is essentially providing insurance to insurance companies around the world. So for us, our industry provides sort of a safety net, a financial safety net to individuals, to millions of people. It's for, insuring against unforeseeable risks, unpredictable risks. For us, COVID has been a huge, huge deal. The kind of specific questions that we're interested in is really, we're interested in extra mortality. We see a certain level of mortality around the globe each year, but this year is exceptional. So we don't necessarily care if it's COVID or not COVID. We're interested in extra mortality. We're also interested in how lethal the disease is. So how much COVID infects and kills people from different groups and different subgroups around the world. We're also very interested in risk factors. How does this interact with healthy or not healthy, or smoking, or hypertension, or cancer, or BMI, or gender, or age, or any number of risk factors that we could think of. And then as we look at the data, it's population data, we have to make the jump to insured data. So all of our data comes at the population level, but can we make the leap over to what it means to insured lives? And then because we're sort of a long-term business, we really care about long-term effects. And it's not just the effect of people dying of COVID, but it's these ripple effects, and long-term and short-term. So we spend a lot of time thinking of what does this mean for the future? What does this mean for, anyway, so we don't just focus on 2020 necessarily.
Thanks, Scott. Salman, are you, all right, there you are. Welcome. Can you give us a little bit about your background and what kind of unique business problems you have seen that you've needed to answer due to COVID? Oh, we still can't hear you. The double mute.
Can you hear me now?
There you are. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So hello, everyone. My name is Salman. I'm a software developer here at MasterCard under the analytics and automation team. As you can imagine, MasterCard's a global company. People are traveling year-round, and COVID really impacted travel. Obviously, MasterCard's focus was the safety of the employees and using data to understand where they were, what would be impacted, and take action there and narrow their focus. The second thought that quickly also came to us was how much it's going to cost us. So we really needed to build processes and dashboards to track things like credit, waivers, and refunds from in-house data, from travel agencies, and the travel and entertainment data that we have in-house.
Awesome. Thank you. So next we'll go over to Ryan. How about you?
I'm Ryan Dillinger. I'm the Chief Analytics Architect for Collins Aerospace. So Collins Aerospace is one of the largest aerospace suppliers in the world. Collins builds, if anybody boards a commercial aircraft, pretty much everything you see in the interior, majority of things in the cockpit, number of items you see in the exterior of the aircraft, as well as number of items for government, space, Department of Defense, so everything from components to rockets, even space suits for NASA. So pretty large portfolio. About 70,000 employees around the world. We're headquartered here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So a number of the COVID questions that immediately came beginning in March, first and foremost was employee health and safety. So we had an immediate need, one of the initiatives for employee health and safety was try to move as many people from working at our various sites and offices to remote work that could possibly. So that meant for us moving from 4,000 to 5,000 remote work employees to 30,000 or 40,000 remote employees in a very short amount of time. So we had a number of questions with it. One, did we have the VPN capacity? Did we have the infrastructure to do that? Would we be able to even handle having that many employees working remotely? So we had a number of initiatives about that, which I can talk about later. Another is what would be the impacts for business? So how do we minimize the impacts for business? We're largely a manufacturing company. Some items that we had to quickly come up with was what are the government regulations that are occurring around the world? How are they going to impact us? And more importantly, how are they going to impact our suppliers, people that provide us parts so we can build components? So how are our suppliers going to be impacted and how will that affect our supply chain?
Wide variety of impacts there, right?
Indeed.
Okay, Seth, how about you?
Hey everybody, I'm Seth Brummund. I work at Doherty Business Solutions. My official job title is an associate consultant, but I do data analytics, data solutions, and mostly around data visualizations. Especially kind of starting this spring, we partnered with the Regional Data Alliance in St. Louis, and they had this vision to create a centralized database to be available to the public, to where we could bring in all this COVID data, census data, unemployment data. And what we really wanted to do was find different correlations and relationships between different data sources, just to better educate the public and anyone that wanted to even draw their own analysis. So basically, I used Tableau a bunch, created dashboards, graphs, charts. Yeah, to try and figure out how we could, stop the spread, figure out where the spread was coming from, and really focus on the St. Louis area and around us, and help others out as much as we could.
So it sounds like the problems you were trying to address were more related to helping the community get access to the data versus one individual company. Is that right?
Yeah. So it was more of giving the community more of an autonomy to look at the problems and the solutions themselves and kind of guiding them along that path. And it wasn't just creating Tableau dashboards, but also creating a website. I mean, it was the whole team that we worked on between the RDA and Doherty. So it was a really cool experience that I was really glad to be a part of.
So to keep us going in this direction.
Questions I was supposed to.
No, you're good. To keep us going in this direction, I'll have you go first on the next set of questions here, Seth. So as you were going through this, can you talk to us a little bit about what data you found to be useful, and or like how have you used data to address whatever questions were coming up? So for Seth, maybe it's the data that was accessible for you.
Yeah, so we used a ton of COVID data. And we grabbed that from Chris Prenner. He did a lot of data visualizations in the St. Louis area and did a lot of data collection for COVID. We also used the census data. So we would hit the census API, grab that data. We also did unemployment for Missouri. And another one we tried to get but had a lot of trouble getting access to was 211 calls, which, if you don't know what those are, is just non-emergency helpline calls. So if people have trouble paying their bills, whether that be rent, mortgage, utilities, they call 211 and they get help from there. So we really wanted to look at that data to see how it correlated and how it changed from past years to this year with the effects of COVID impacting it. And so it was really cool to kind of see some of those correlations. And so.
All right. So Ryan, how about you in the aerospace industry? What kind of data did you find yourself digging into?
Well, for COVID, one of the most important pieces of data was our HR data, because our company is fairly decentralized. We have a number of different sites around the world. So we have one site, 10,000 employees. The next largest site is 1,500. And then a lot of other sites that are smaller than 1,000 employees. So one was to quickly be able to get at where everybody is working. To be able to locate employees that are located in COVID-19 hotspots. And then to see where our employees are located, especially in the U.S., it was a patchwork. It's been a patchwork of regulations around COVID-19. See how those regulations would impact the workforce for our employees. We also need that information to help, for example, to help people work from home with our VPN capacity to make sure that we had our VPN servers set up in the right location, or if we need to spin up in other regions, because we might get a sudden demand from work from home employees. So be able to figure out where people are, how they're affected by COVID, and how we can help them to work remotely. As well as the governments around the world, especially the U.S. government, World Health Organization, and Johns Hopkins University have been very helpful in tracking down information on COVID-19 hotspots, as well as upcoming government regulations about whether states or countries are locking down, adding additional regulations, or loosening up, and those are items that we need to plan for. Those have been, we have just a myriad of others within the company, but to date, those have been our most beneficial ones that we've looked at so far.
Absolutely. Salman, how about you? What kind of data did you access?
Yep, so similarly, we've used travel and entertainment data that we had in-house. We used travel agency data that we have from third-party partners. We also used the World Health Organization COVID data to kind of blend it with our the data that we had to help us understand and narrow down, like Ryan said, hotspots and breakouts and stuff like that.
Awesome. And then last but not least, Scott, what can you tell us about the data that you guys work with?
Yeah, sure. So our goal is really to build projection models, mortality projection models across the globe by age, by gender, by a number of factors. So we knew we would build our own models, but there's a lot of assumptions going into those models. So we would try to find age and gender data really from around the globe, mainly focused on cases and deaths initially, but ultimately trying to get to infection fatality rate, which is the death rate of a person who is infected. It's very difficult to get to that, but we would use a lot of sources around the world. Certainly something like Our World in Data or Johns Hopkins is certainly good. The challenge is, of course, they don't always have split outs by age and by gender. So oftentimes we would have to scrape data from different PDFs from around the world. We also care a lot about existing conditions and people who have impairments and diabetes and hypertension and so forth. So we found a lot of value in, there's a study in the UK called the Open Safely study that's been very beneficial. But early on, as you can imagine, data was hard to come by, and certainly health data. So we had to look at things like the Diamond Princess cruise ship. We had to look at early tests from Korea. We had to really, really pull it together to try to come up with good assumptions.
Yeah. So the thing that really strikes me as each one of you talk about the problems that you were looking at and the data is that there wasn't a lot of overlap. You all talked about everybody has some form of the COVID data, like the Johns Hopkins or something like that. But then once we got beyond that, it sounded like everybody had very different approaches, very different ways of handling this. So before we go any further, I do want to call out to everybody. If you have questions for the panel, please submit them in the chat. We'll see if we can get to some of those as we go through here. We are a little short on time, but we'll see what we can fit in. But I wanted to toss the next question out just kind of openly to the panel. Scott, you started to already get into a little bit of this, but what can you tell me about some of the biggest obstacles that you've run into in collecting and using this data that you're now finding yourself needing to get into really quickly and in a new and different way than what you've had to do in the past?
Yeah, I started to talk a little bit about consistency. You know, one country won't have age groups, or they'll have different age groups, or one country won't provide gender. We did a lot of scraping around the globe to come up with good data. And, you know, we're a reinsurance company. We're not well known by the public, but we put out a paper on COVID mortality by age and gender. And to this day, we're still #1 in Google, which is really unusual for a company like ours. But it's just because nobody was sort of scraping this data together around the world. So that was part of it. Another thing is we've been modeling pandemics my whole career. You know, we're a global reinsurance company. We care a lot about pandemics, and we've had pandemic committees my whole career. But we've always talked about, you know, the 1918 pandemic or the 1957 pandemic or 1968 pandemic, or we don't have very many data points. And so with this particular exercise, we've gone back and we've asked questions about what does the 1957 pandemic look like? And we've gone back and scraped, used like OCR methods to scrape data by cause of death and to really understand those patterns of what happened around the pandemic and were they all respiratory or how, you know, what the impact was. So that's part of it. Real quick, also the definition of COVID is greatly different around the world. And so that's another challenge.
Yeah. Anybody else have an example of some challenges they've run into?
Yeah, probably for anybody who's worked in analytics or data engineering for a while, as you know, you very rarely get well-structured, clean data. You usually expect to get dirty data. It's usually very fractured. And oftentimes the biggest challenge is just access to the data, and it's not from usually external sources. If you work in a large company, it can be from your own internal company. So for example, my company, Hawkins is a subsidiary of Raytheon Technologies. And so the COVID-19 data sets that we need to get access, the HR data sets, as well as our VPN data sets, they existed at different levels of the company. So some existed up with our parent company, some existed within the realm of our own company, some existed at some other subsidiaries of the company. So with that need, the need for this was very urgent. So, we needed to move from 5,000 remote employees to 30 to 40,000 remote employees in a matter of 2 weeks. We needed to plan out what was going to happen to our business within a matter of 3 weeks, whether suppliers were going to shut down or not, whether we needed to shut down facilities. So in that space, really the impetus is not on perfect data, not make some perfect solution, is to get the data in whatever format you can get and try to work with a set of tools that you can use to cleanse the data, transform the data, and move it to a usable format. So fortunately for us, we were already fairly heavily invested in a tool, Alteryx. So we were able to go to different departments in our company and just tell them, just give us dumps of data, just dump out the data, give it to us in whatever format you have it. We'll take care of cleaning it up. We'll take care of transforming it. We'll take care of combining it and joining it. And we'll take care of it and putting out into a usable format that our data scientists and analysts can actually use. So for us, this was a matter of, urgency versus the perfect solution. Since this is something that was very urgent, and in all likelihood, the longevity of it, we're looking at 6 months to 18 months, maybe 2 years. So you can live with an imperfect solution in that time because the urgency and the greater good is so much more. So for us, a very good benefit was that we already had a good data tool, a good data transformation tool in place to enable us to move very quickly on these.
Yeah. I know one thing from Edward Jones' perspective. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Seth.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say from Edward Jones' perspective.
I was just going to answer the question. If you got something to follow up on that.
Go ahead, Seth. It's all yours.
Okay. I was collecting data, but once we got it, it's kind of all of these different data sources, getting them to line up. And one of the big issues I had was kind of connecting zip codes to counties, because it's not a one-to-one relationship. It can be, one zip code can be in 3 different counties. So knowing, all right, how am I going to take this zip code's, census data and correlate it to the county collected COVID data. So coming up with a solution that would be accepted was a little tricky. We ended up kind of going with, all right, most of the people, the majority of the people live in that county. We're going to say that that zip code is in that county. And most of the time it was a 80, 90+% of people living in a specific county. So it usually wasn't too big of a deal, but there were some times where it was pretty close to 50-50 hard set rule. One of the other things I kind of realized as we got further and further into the pandemic was that when you look at COVID counts, it's accumulated numbers from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. So as soon as like a county, a city, wherever had their first case of COVID, everything after that was just added on. So you look at the counts and you say, oh, wow, there's 20,000 COVID cases in my area. Well, no, not actually. That's the total number. Right now, there's actually only a few hundred, 1,000, whatever the number might be. And so that was one of the things I actually tried to do, was come up with a active COVID case number for a given area. And I could not find that number that someone else had kind of created and done themselves. So I came up with an imperfect solution. I don't know if it would be accepted in any sort of statistical manner, but I just took some averages of how long the average cases were for different ending scenarios. So that was kind of a fun problem to kind of try and solve on my own. But yeah.
What I was going to say is the one problem that I saw us running into at Edward Jones with this was the actual rate with which the questions themselves changed. 1 week we'd be looking to see when should we be opening up offices in this zip code, and 2 weeks later we were trying to figure out, oh, should we be closing those offices we just opened because maybe that wasn't a good decision. So the rate at which we were coming up with new questions forced us to think about the data differently every single week as we're going through these iterations trying to create dashboards around the COVID data. So that was one of the things that was just really strikingly obvious to us, was how fast we had to make these decisions. So we'll keep moving on here. For the next question, as let's think about in the future. So as we look forward, as we look into the future, how do you see the things that we've learned in this past year? How do we see the insights that we found affecting the way we might do business in the future? And again, I'll just open this up to the panel if you've kind of thought through this question a little bit.
Yeah, so for us, in the aerospace industry, so we're in commercial aerospace, defense, and government. And one of those businesses, commercial aerospace, has taken a huge plunge in demand. So for us, the real lesson here is how we become a better manufacturer and a more flexible manufacturer. So we deal with a huge drop in demand, and in all likelihood, down the road, we'll see a huge uptick in demand from the commercial airspace. So how do we flex and be able to respond to that demand without losing our manufacturing capabilities. So how do we not lose our manufacturing capability to catch the upside while being able to weather the downside of it? So it's, from all of our conversations, it's making us a much more agile and nimble organization to be able to respond to sudden changes without them being catastrophic for organizations.
Absolutely.
I'd say for us, it's really two things. So we take a long-term focus. So you know, certainly understanding mortality patterns over time is very important to us. So the first thing we'll want to do is understand future mortality improvement or deterioration around the globe related to this. In other words, did, you know, all these people that died, maybe a lot of them were already sick, which we know to be the case. So we'll sort of start to assess our short-term assumptions. The second thing is our pandemic modeling abilities will be drastically improved. We were already scheduled first or second quarter of this year, we were already scheduled to revisit our pandemic modeling. You know, starting in March, we realized we're not going to do that this year because let's let this year play out and maybe next year play out. And so we're going to probably definitely revisit our pandemic modeling with all this new data. And I think we'll have a completely new approach to what we do and how we do it.
For you, Scott, this is probably data that's never truly been available like this before, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we've used these data points, the last one being more than 50 years ago. So yep. It's very difficult. It is our tail risk. We do put a lot of money aside to protect against that. But you know, tail risk is something you don't always have the chance to model perfectly. So
yeah,
because that's the goal of this pandemic modeling is how much do we put in the bank to protect ourselves against this? Do we put $1 billion aside or 2 billion, or what do we put aside to protect? If you put too much away, investors will say, what are you sitting on all this capital for? And if you don't put enough away, you could be in big trouble. So
right. All right.
Ryan, there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you've seen it, but
the question in the chat actually gets into the last question, which I'll go ahead and address that and launch the next question. So the question that I had for the panelists, and I'll put that out there and then I'll answer it from, I think the question that's there is, what if you had, you know, and this is the last question for everybody on the panel, unless others come up in the chat here, but what is one key takeaway or piece of advice that you would give to others looking to make decisions or advise decisions based on the data you've seen or the lessons you've learned in this changing environment? And that kind of goes into the question that was asked in the chat. The question was around having to shift goals and have a fast turnaround of analysis because of COVID. And I would say for us at Edward Jones, that was one of the key learnings, right? Was how can we shift faster? And it really forced us to think about how we address problems in an agile manner, how we use agile instead of waterfall on some of our projects, how we bring the business areas who are asking questions directly into our projects and into our dashboarding sessions. While we're looking at the data for the first time, we bring the business with us and having to make those decisions much more quickly instead of the way we would traditionally do it, where we might have a little bit of development, maybe a week or two, and then bring it back to the business. In this case, we're having to bring the business into those conversations daily and saying, hey, is this answering your question? Or, hey, here's the data that we have. Now you see it. Do you still have the same question? And a lot of times it's, well, no, now that I see the data, my question is this instead. And so it made our dashboarding and data design even much more iterative because it's changing at such a infrequent basis. And so that's something that we will use going forward is how do we know what that pace is and kind of look at it and try to decide how we want to pace our projects as we go. Sometimes we need to make decisions faster in a project, and we're now more equipped to do that because we've been forced to through the analysis we've had to do here. So for this last question, I want to go through each panelist one more time. So key takeaway or advice. We'll go ahead and start with you, Scott.
Yeah, as a takeaway, I guess, like, I probably would say domain knowledge is pretty important. Certainly filtering through all the data, you gotta be able to understand what you're seeing and interpret the data. I think so. Domain knowledge is huge. I guess my advice would be, to make sure companies have a very forward-looking risk management framework, focusing on, low probability, high severity events is important. I read a story this morning about the All England Club in that hosts Wimbledon every year. And Wimbledon, back in 2003, they had the SARS outbreak, and the All England Club met, and they decided that due to the SARS outbreak, they were going to be proactive in their risk management, and they put a pandemic clause into their insurance policy that says if Wimbledon is ever canceled for pandemics, there would be a payout. And because of that, forward-looking, 16, 17 years later, the All England Club they get a payment of $140, $150 million to make up for their losses. And they're able to pay some of their tennis players, they're able to go on. And so that'd be my advice, is that this stuff you don't want to talk about during the normal course of business. It's very valuable.
Absolutely. I love it. Seth, how about you?
Yeah, I kind of like what Scott said, domain knowledge is key. I know dealing with some of that census data and trying to figure out what some of the fields meant took some digging. But then just in general, kind of getting training and continuously learning how to manipulate data, even just use visualization tools like Tableau. I know the entire time I was constantly looking up and taking different little e-learning classes, researching, trying to find out different ways to play with the data and manipulate it and get it to look like what I wanted it to look like. So it's kind of one of the biggest things that I got.
So really staying on top of your skills.
Yeah.
All right. Salman, how about you?
Yep, a lot of them already gave good advice. I think building flexible logic to accommodate repeatability, and iterate on it, make it more profound, dynamic, and stable, and reusable is really important. I think also to answer some Elsa's question, some of the ways that I learned to turn things around was either learning to do an app in Alteryx and make sure that I have the data as a starting point from somewhere while I figured out how the API for that third party worked or things like that really helped us during the process. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, probably the two biggest lessons we learned from this is, one, how valuable skilled data engineering is. For this particular instance, things came at us very quickly. There was not time to get clean data. There was not time to make the perfect solution or even necessarily a good solution, but a good enough solution. And so the skill sets of data engineers is very important at being able to find the data, clean it up, make it structurally able to be used, good integrity to the data. So we really relied heavily on a lot of data engineering skills. As well, a key takeaway was, well, this was nothing new for anybody who's in the analytics space for a while, but particularly in my company, how valuable data visualization is, being able to present what you find in a quick manner that's very intuitive and easy to understand. For this particular pandemic, this was the first time that Tableau had actually been put forward live in front of the board of directors. COVID-19 was impacting business. And so it was the first time our executive leadership had really been exposed to a good data visualization tool like Tableau. And without that experience, they didn't realize, how quickly and intuitively you can communicate this information, and they really liked it. It presented them with what they needed to be able to make the decisions, which they had coming at them constantly, very quickly. So, quick turnaround on decisions that were just flying at them all the time, and it really helped them out. So, data engineering skills and the power of being able to make good presentations of the data through data visualization was a great learning point for our company.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. All right, so that concludes the questions I have that we kind of had predefined. Are there any questions outstanding in the chat? JJ, Elsa, I don't know who's watching those.
I don't see any, Ryan.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to thank you, panelists, one more time. We really appreciated you attending and helping us out today. You gave some very insightful information in terms of, how your different businesses were reacting with COVID and COVID data. And we just really can't thank you enough for spending time in your afternoon to come talk to us. And also to thank everybody who came and cut out a couple hours of their day today to visit the St. Louis Tableau user group, our third virtual meeting. Again, just a quick reminder, the Tableau conference, virtual Tableau conference is coming up the first week of October. So if you haven't registered for that, go ahead and do that. It's free. And you get lots more valuable information about Tableau there. I believe our next meeting for the St. Louis Tableau user group will be in November. I don't know if we have a date set yet, but that would be our typical cadence. So if we don't see you before then, thanks a lot for attending, and we'll see you soon.
Hey, and just so everybody's aware, I know everybody's curious, but dynamic parameters 1 on the new features. So we'll try to do a deep dive on those in our November meeting. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Ryan.